Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Canucks Conversation, brought to you by our friends over at Greta. As you see the toque in front of me, for those of you on the YouTube live show and on the replay, it kind of blends in with my shirt, but Greta sent us some swag, and one of those pieces of swag. Do you say swag much?
No.
Oh, I do. One of those pieces of swaggery, all that Riz, is the Greta toque in front of us on the desk, or in front of me on the desk. I've been wearing that toque quite a bit. It's very nice. I like the Greta logo. It's very, very nice, as are our friends over at Greta, the home of our electric watch parties. Greta is Canucks Army spot to catch the game throughout the season, playoffs, and also our place to chill in the off season. We're not going to share exact dates yet, but another watch party coming up. Looks like it's going to be in February. Just not sure exactly when, but February, we're going to have another watch party over at Greta. Just teasing a little right now. And you're going to be there. You weren't at the first one because you weren't on this show yet, but you'll be there at the second one, and it'll be a lot of fun. It's going to be real fun. Harmon, how was your Christmas, your New Year's? Well, I guess I've talked to you since Christmas. How was New Year's?
It was good. I honestly just stayed in and hung out with my sister. I'd been out with friends the night before, and I think I'm realizing that. So I'm 23 now. I'm aging out of the clubs, man.
Oh yeah,
I just don't enjoy it anymore.
I went to a club for the first time when I was 21, and the last time I went, I was also 21. Or maybe I went to the, what's the one? The Cowboy, the Yale. Yale. I went there at 22. That was fun. But I went to, and no free ads, but I went to I guess it's not really an ad. I'm talking bad about it. Where was it? I don't know why I can't remember the names. Fortune Sound Club, I think it's called.
No.
I hated that. I hated it.
I ran into a listener though on Saturday night.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm quickly like, oh yeah, this isn't it anymore. And it makes it that much funnier because I remember first training camp in Victoria. I just turned 19. And me not understanding even what a club was or the difference between a club and a bar. I went up to Trance and I was like, hey, I want to go clubbing. I've never been. Do you want to come with me? Like, he laughed in my face and I didn't really get it. And now in hindsight, I'm like, geez, how funny did that sound from his perspective? That,
dude,
he's in his 30s. And
how often do we always talk about when we're the old guys in the media and those young whippersnappers come through the Vancouver media on their TikTok and whatever app they're using to deliver their Canucks content, and we're hanging on to podcasting for dear life? Those people are going to come up to us at some point and ask us the same question of, hey, do you guys want to go clubbing? And it's like, no, we don't. We're here to cover training camp and do the work. That's going to happen.
What do people do when they're in their, like, of course, most people, when they're in their late 20s and early 30s, have families. They're tied up with a lot of responsibilities. But if and when you do end up free on like a Friday night or a Saturday night, and a few of your other friends are also free, what do you guys do? Is it like you just hang out in somebody's house?
Yeah, I think so.
Do people go to like
you
pubs?
bring the party to your place? Yeah.
You go to the pub, watch the Canucks game. A lot of people watch Canucks games together,
and you're in bed by 9:30, and that's that.
Oh, that's the life.
No, yeah, I had friends over for New Year's, and I quite enjoyed it. You make a big dinner, some desserts, some drinks, and maybe go light off a few fireworks, blow some horns, bang some pots and pans together.
You mentioned running into a listener. Shout out whoever the listener was. I didn't catch your name. In my building, literally in my building, I was walking Bert and I'm getting in the elevator and some guy pokes his head in as I'm talking to one of my neighbors in the elevator, pokes his head in and goes, quads? I was like, hey, yeah. And the door's closing. He's like, oh, love your podcast, man. And then his head was gone. I don't know what you look like. I don't know your name. I don't know anything. But shout out to the listener who said he loved our podcast. So I'm assuming he'll hear this. Message me on Twitter. Get a hold of me somehow. Maybe don't come to my apartment ever again. No, I'm kidding. But let me know. That was an interesting experience.
I have a listener of both shows actually living in my building. Shout out Jeff Y. I forget exactly how I pronounce his last name, but good guy.
Yeah, this guy was a good guy too. I just don't know his name or anything about him. But busy show today, and you would not know it based on how we've opened this show. But there's a lot to get to. Jeff Paterson's going to join us in about 10 minutes time. But first, Harmon, we're going to break down the Canucks month of January as the title suggests. But before we do that, we need to talk about Jonathan Lekkerimäki and Team Sweden over in Sweden. Also, you brought up not going out on New Year's Eve. sounded like Patrick Allvin may have gotten after it a little bit. I don't know if you heard his interview on TSN today. I was cracking up at it because, and I'm cracking up for my own reasons, my own childish reasons. He may have just stayed home, but his voice was gone. Like he lost his voice doing something. And I'm just putting the, as a journalist would, putting the pieces of the puzzle together. He's in Sweden for New Year's Eve, right? Like he's in Sweden, lost his voice 2 days later when he's doing the interview. I'm thinking Patrick Allvin may have gotten after it in Sweden, and hey, all the power to him. All the power to him.
Well, we were joking with J Pat and the media pool yesterday for New Year's. We were at practice, and the Sedins weren't there, and we were like, "Yeah, the Sedins definitely they're the poster boys of going out on New Year's Eve and too hungover for practice." And then we're like, "No, what likely happened is they probably had like one drink, and we're like, we got to do the grass grind New Year's Day to burn all this off." So,
oh man, yes, that does sound like the Sedins. Jeremy Lee in the chat said 23 is apparently old now. Because
I never said I was old.
We just feel old.
I'm just not that young anymore.
No, I think that'll be our first question to Jeff: is how much money he would need to be paid to go clubbing with us. First question to J-Pat. Okay, I brought it up. I want to talk about it a little bit more. Sweden, I don't even want to use the term takes down. Sweden eventually wins against Switzerland in the quarterfinal round of the World Juniors. They are off to the semis to play Czechia. Jonathan Lekarmaki scores a goal, his fourth of the tournament, to put Sweden up 2-0. And I don't want to even break down the game. It wasn't a great game by Sweden. They had to win in overtime against Switzerland, and that would have been a massive upset in front of the home crowd if Switzerland had come back and won in overtime. But of course, it was Sweden that gets the final goal with Axel Sandin Pellikka scoring. And not to diverge too much, but every time ASP is brought up, I'm reminded that in every draft class, and this is the thing I'll miss most about Faber being on the team side and not really being able to do this part of the job, but Faber would be doing his scouting and there would be some top 10, like consensus top 10 defensemen that Faber just hates. Like he would tell me, he's like, dude, I'm watching this guy. He sucks. In Philip Broberg's draft year, it was Philip Broberg. And Faber's, hey, he's been right. He's been right about that. Poked all these holes in Broberg's game. And he did the same with Axel Sandin Pellikka. And obviously, Faber used to be my main source for my opinions on prospects. I didn't watch nearly as much as him. I don't think anybody ever really did. Now we have Dave Hall, obviously, who does a similar amount of work as Faber did. But I don't know. I was watching him play and I'm remembering everything Faber told me about him, all the negatives about ASP. And I saw them all. And I was texting with Faber during the game. And I was like, man, ASP, I see this, like all these issues. And then he scores the game-winning goal. And I'm like, wait, this is why people think he's good, because he can score. He scores the timely goal. Everybody's like, oh, this guy's great. So there you go. That's just my ASP take from Faber.
Yeah, I haven't watched enough of him in the SHL.
Neither have I.
Season, but I will say, as a rule of thumb, there's a sort of belief that is sort of emerging from some talent evaluators that if you're sub 6 foot, as ASP is, and you're a defenseman, that unless you're a Quinn Hughes caliber, like elite, no doubt about it prospect, that those D prospects, for whatever reason, often just don't pan out. Like you think about an Eric Brandstrom, and I know that he's an everyday NHL player, but he was the centerpiece of the Mark Stone trade going to Ottawa. And despite how well he looked in the SHL, just never really panned out. You look at Adam Boqvist, right? Was an unreal prospect coming up, has never really panned out. And so to me, ASP is going to be a really interesting litmus test to see, okay, does this player type miss again? Because there's been a bit of that, trend of unless you're elite, that these sub 6 foot defensemen that are drafted relatively high, sometimes they do disappoint.
It reminds me a little bit of Nils Lundqvist, like archetype, obviously.
Another great example, actually.
Yeah, it reminds me of him because there's one that has worked out, right? It has worked out. I'm just curious about this player type with Sandin Pellikka, and it's a great point that you bring up. But I found that whole draft to be so interesting because, in the lead up to it, ASP is like, yeah, he's got to be a top 10 pick. He's going to be there. He's going to be a top 10 pick. And, guys like Ryan Backer and Simashev were being discussed as like 15 and beyond for most of the year. And then it was only in the months leading up to the draft that those guys' stock really increased. Like I remember Faber wrote an article for Canucks Army where he said, learn this name now because in 2 months, everybody's going to have this guy going 6 to 9 in that range in the draft. And it was David Reinbacher, who at the time was supposed to go like at least after 10 for sure. But like a lot of people saying like late teens, and Faber said, he's like, this guy's going to go in the 6 to 9 range. And he ended up going 5th overall to Montreal. And obviously we know all the things that happened after that with Habs fans sending him hate and stuff because they wanted Michkov, which anyways, we're not going to get into that. And I don't know how we got down this trail, but Simashev was the other guy that Faber brought up that was like, yeah, this is going to be another guy who people aren't talking about now, but he might be the best defenseman in the draft. And I just remember Faber throwing out, yeah, the Canucks should draft Simashev at 11. And people were like, you're stupid. And anyways, shout out Faber today, starting the show off right with one of those. Okay, did you have any takes that you wanted to deliver from the Sweden game? We didn't really get into it. The main one I had was that Jonathan Lekarmaki looks so dangerous on the power play. And I don't know if we have the video here. We should have the link in the little sheet there, Grady, of the first goal that he scored in that game and the only goal that he scored in that game. Just an absolute piss missile, far side on the Swiss netminder, who you and I broke it down. Like we were looking at it. The Swiss netminder is all sorts of lost. He's leaning blocker side through the screen. And then by the time he finds it through the screen and goes to make the save, he's going the wrong way, and Lekarmaki's going far side. Just a ridiculous shot on this kid. Obviously, it's the number one thing we heard about when he was drafted, but the way he's kind of put everything together is so interesting because, and I highlighted this on Twitter, was when you see him play now and you see him controlling the play away from the puck as well, and you see him making good decisions, winning board battles, just various things that he's doing now. It's hard to believe that he was Sweden's 13th forward at this time last year at this tournament. Like he was basically a non-factor for Sweden last year, and now he's such a key part of the team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to how rapidly, first of all, prospects can develop in the space of 12 months when they are this young. And credit to Lekarmaki because it has been that type of transformational year, not just obviously play in international play, but on the pro side as well. Last season, before the Allsvenskan playoffs, he was struggling on a routine basis to be an impact player outside of the power play. And now he's in the SHL, and yeah, he's still leaning a lot on the man advantage to score. But in the top Swedish men's league, he is still holding his own. He's still driving chances, getting to the inside a lot more. The level of confidence he has with the puck, again, it just feels night and day. So I think his Strong World Junior so far is just an extension of what we've seen from him in league play. And it gives you some, like, this is a step he needed to take, honestly, to have in Canucks brass mind that, okay, could this be a player that could contribute at the NHL level in 2 or 3 years? He needed this type of year.
We totally mismanaged our time, so we don't have time to break down the Canucks schedule for the month of January, but we will do that on the other side of Jeff Paterson. I even have more on the Lekarmaki, but can we see the goal, Grady? Can we just see the goal that Lekarmaki
quickly and incredibly accurate
PSN,
zip,
of course,
right through.
It's just what a shot! Like what a shot that was to go far side like that. Kid can shoot. Jeff Paterson shoots, as we saw at the Canucks media skate. Let's bring him in. Jeff Paterson. You can check him out tonight after the game on Rinkwide Vancouver. There he is. Jeff, thanks for doing this.
In my defense, because lots of people came at me on social media with the video that Rob the Hockey Guy, there was no questions asked about his video. He just started going like rogue and posting videos of both you and me out there skating. It had been a couple of years since I had been on skates. And if you watch the video closely, like the skating was fine. The shot was a little weak. I wasn't wearing gloves. And that's my excuse that it was, it was Anthony Beauvillier's stick that was just lying around the rink. And clearly it didn't work. It didn't work for him. It didn't work for me either. So those are my excuses when it came to the rather weak shot on goal, not like Jonathan Lekarmaki. I have to take some tips or get some tips from him for that next media skate.
Well, I'll tell you, it looked like an absolute rifle when you were shooting it right after me. That's what you do. You make me shoot
That's
first,
true.
and then you
You're
go next.
right.
And in my defense, I was using a Travis Dermott stick. So hey, same sort of deal as you, Jeff. I know you had the Beauvillier, and I had the Dermott stick. They were nice. They were like my size. Those sticks. They were like perfectly sized out, and really, it really makes you think: how tall are these guys really? More on Canucks Army later this year. Jeff, you were at practice today. Morning skate. Wayne Gretzky was there.
Yeah.
Before we get to the Canucks stuff, do you have any Wayne Gretzky stories for us? Maybe from today, maybe from the past?
Well, first of all, he just appeared like that new restaurant and lounge where, in between the players' benches, nobody uses that for morning skates and practices, but he's the great one. I guess he can go wherever he wants. But he just kind of emerged, and the media pack sitting in the stands. We're watching the Canucks work on power play one, and somebody was like, "It's Gretzky." And then sure enough, yeah, that is Wayne Gretzky. And he took a seat. He watched for a little while. Was in Seattle yesterday for the Winter Classic, made his way up here. Sounds like he's going to be at the game tonight. So we'll be in the company of greatness, hockey royalty. We already had Prince Harry at the rink earlier this year. But yeah, I don't think Gretzky gets to these parts very often. My Wayne Gretzky story, and this goes back to, we're going back 2 decades now. So yeah, I mean, come with me on a little walk down memory lane. But when I first started hosting Canucks pre- and post-game shows on CKNW, the very first one that I did, the Canucks played the Rangers in a season opener, which is kind of weird to think of the Rangers being all the way out here for a season opener. But Wayne Gretzky had a fashion line. I don't know if you guys remember, but in association with the Bay, Hudson's Bay, he had his own line of clothing. And he was making the rounds and doing a promotional tour. And they gave us the opportunity to go and speak to him the afternoon of the game. But there were conditions that the interview had to be about the fashion line. Well, I'm hosting the pregame show that night, and I get a chance to talk to Wayne Gretzky. So I go in with the tape deck and the recorder, and with all these PR people around, I was like, forget it. This is the Canucks season opener. I got the great one. We're talking hockey. And so to his credit, he played along. And then I had to throw in a softball at the end about a cashmere sweater or something, just to let him expound on his fashion line. So I've had the chance to talk to him a few times over the years, but that one always stuck out to me just because there were all these eyeballs watching in this small little back room at the Bay downtown. Not your usual sort of pregame hockey fare, but he was good then, and he was pretty good when he played as well. And what might have been? He could have been a Vancouver Canuck, but he wasn't, obviously. Instead, he was a guy that torched the Canucks and just about every other opponent that he faced throughout his legendary career.
J-Pat, the coaching staff has a decision to make tonight in terms of which forward they're going to make a healthy scratch. We suspect it may be Höglander just based off previous practices, him skating as an extra. But forget about what the coaching staff is thinking for a second here. What would you do in this situation in terms of the forward you would perhaps be looking to take out of the lineup?
Well, before I answer that, Harm, let's just, Rick Tocchet has been honest as the day is long. You ask the guy a question and you get a 3-minute answer on just about anything. And as a media member, I really appreciate that because not all coaches are as, open and willing to answer questions. And certainly when it comes to their lineup. And so, he confirmed Demko in goal, confirmed that Carson Soucy's not yet ready to go. So it's the same 6 defensemen they've used all through the month of December. But then when I asked him point blank this morning, is Höglander the odd man out? And he said, we're not sure. We've got to go through a few things. And I thought, okay, that's interesting because Höglander has been the extra skater at practice the last couple of days. It seemed pretty straightforward. But I also noticed that Sam Lafferty and Mark Friedman were just playing pass at center ice during an optional skate for what seemed like an extended period of time. And of course, Friedman's the forgotten man. When Soucy gets back, he's going to drop to 8th on the depth chart. It would probably take a couple of injuries for him to see game action again. But Sam Lafferty has kind of toiled. He's been a terrific addition to this hockey club, but we saw him play higher in the lineup and now he's down on the 4th line, but he's not killing penalties. And I do wonder if his number is the one that's going to come up tonight. So just keep that in mind as we go closer to warm up tonight, that no guarantees that it's going to be Höglander. Look, Nils Höglander got a bit quiet on juice from them for a handful of games, but he said the reason that, they don't have that possession, it speaks to Phil DiGiuseppe, who's getting an opportunity to be reunited with Besser and Miller tonight. And we'll see what he can do with it. Lafferty, I think, kind of falls into that category as scratch, quite frankly. I mean, this guy leads the team in goals per 60, all of his even strength contributions. Like, I'd like to find more of a role for him on that second unit power play. And instead, it seems, well, if he's not going to be in the top 6, Rick Tocchet just doesn't trust him to be in the lower in the lineup. But at the same time, Tocchet wants guys that, are aggressive and get in on the forecheck and win their board battles and all those things that Höglander does and has done really whenever he's been in the lineup, regardless of where he's played. So I kind of thought in my own mind that with his performance, the fact he's got double-digit goals already this year before Christmas, that maybe he was one of those guys that had finally arrived now and had a spot in the lineup. Now, nobody can take anything for granted, and you do have to perform. Ultimately, there's got to be a bottom line to it. So I'm a little disappointed when I saw them line up for practice after Christmas, and he was the odd guy out. But they want to get Phil DiGiuseppe back in there. They want to see if he can sort of return to his form of those first 10 games of the year when he did play well and contributed with Miller and Besser. And we'll see if PDG can provide that juice in that spot. But, whether it's DiGiuseppe, whether it's Höglander, whether it's Lafferty, it just, again, to me, with Kuzmenko's inconsistency, it underscores the area of need for the Vancouver Canucks. And to me, that is another top 6 scoring forward.
Jeff, your ponderings this weekend. In Paterson's point, you wrote about the Vancouver Canucks power play. Your headline, the Vancouver Canucks power play is too good to be this bad. Still top 10, but explain that column and your concern with the power play.
Well, and I was delighted, honestly, and I don't think it had anything to do with my column, but to see them, I mean, they really had a Power Play 1 summit. Like, it was a task force this morning with Tocchet and the Sedins and Yogi Sarkovsky, the skills coach, out there for the better part of half an hour. Like, other guys toiled at the other end of the ice, not your usual optional morning skate, and certainly it wasn't optional for the guys on Power Play 1. So I was fascinated. Usually morning skates, particularly optionals, are pretty mundane. This was not the case. And Tocchet stayed with his group, and a ton of walkthroughs and positioning guys. And the fact that PD looks like he's moving to the bumper tonight is an interesting wrinkle there. So, yeah, I mean, look, you look at the assembled talent: Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, Brock Besser. And I do think that Kuzmenko, if he's going to be in the lineup, then put him on that first unit power play. I mean, we saw how well he contributed last year, and obviously this has been a different year. But I do think with all of the success this team has had, all of the victories, all of the big numbers on the scoreboard, 7 against San Jose before Christmas and 5 in Nashville not that long ago. And of course, you go way back 10 and 8, and goals haven't been an issue for this team. And yet you look at the power play, guys, 5 for 40 in the month of December, 12.5%. It's been running at 14% for 20 games now. They've played 36, like more than half the games that they have played, their power play is near the very bottom of the National Hockey League. And again, I just think that even the team and the coaches, they keep spitting out this notion of, oh, we just need a goal here or a goal there. Or if we had scored one against Philadelphia, this wouldn't even be an issue. Forget that. It would be an issue. This is the power play that's been running at 14% for 20 games now. Like, that's not good enough. And we've talked about the issues that they had, and you saw it against Philadelphia. I mean, that's the latest example of breaking down these opponents that don't give up much. Well, the power play is the perfect way to cash in, and this power play should be a difference maker. And again, they're winning hockey games, and they haven't had to rely on the power play. But guess what? Second half of the season, they're going to see a ton of tough opponents. They're going to play a ton of these games that are 1-goal slogs where a power play goal here or there can make the difference. So I kind of felt like it was not validation so much for my article, but just the idea that, yes, the coaching staff recognized that, talk is cheap. It is about performing on the ice. And so there was a lot of talk this morning about going back to doing what they did. I mean, I think they were 21 for 63 in the first 15 games, like 1 for every 3. I mean, they were running at 33%. Not likely to stay at that level, but you saw what was possible. And the idea that JT Miller and Elias Pettersson have 1 power play goal apiece in the last 19 games, like, those guys are trotted out on the first unit every single night out. Like, how is that possible? And Quinn Hughes with 1 power play point in his first 14 games. Like, okay, so you go through a dry spell. That's fine. But the dry spell has come on the heels of him having 15 power play points in the first 22 games this season. Same player, same group of players out there. Okay, Kuzmenko's been in and out of the lineup, but again, the contrast is just wild to me. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a believer in this power play, but saying that doesn't mean anything. You got to go out there and prove it. And so it is time that I think Tocchet kind of snapped them to attention. And, we'll see. And the other part, guys, is the Ottawa Senators, worst penalty killing in the National Hockey League, under 70% on the road. And on top of that, they're one of the least disciplined teams in the National Hockey League. So this feels like it's setting up. You put all this work in this morning in the morning skate. You get an opponent that has flown cross continent, not having a great season and can't kill penalties. Let's see if the Canucks can make some hay here with the man advantage tonight.
Speaking of penalty killing, how much of the struggles do you think has to do with teams adjusting to what the Canucks do on the power play? Are the Canucks maybe becoming too predictable on the power play?
Yeah, I mean, I just think they've lost that sort of puck hunger, and they were in such attack mode early in the season, and all that movement, and Quinn Hughes was just causing fits. I mean, we all raved about the shot volume and the sort of the upgrade and the strength of his shot. If his shot wasn't beating goaltenders, it was getting through layers, it was causing problems for goaltenders. There were rebounds and tips and all those types of things. He's not shooting as much. Now, some of that probably is that teams are trying to adjust, but how do you adjust to Quinn Hughes? You can say, oh, you're going to pay special attention to him. Players like that are hard to contain, as you know. So I just think Quinn Hughes has to recognize his role in all of this. And so much of the power play success starts with him. And if teams do want to shade to his side, and we've seen that for the last couple of years with Jeff Paterson out on the right flank, and teams have kind of, moved a guy over that way and said, hey, we're going to make you beat us with your other four players. It's the same situation now, if that's the case with Quinn Hughes. But I just think Quinn Hughes is too good to be completely neutralized the way that he has been for 14 games now on the power play. So, pro sports, pro hockey, it's all about adjustments. And, you put your best out there, teams are going to watch and adapt, and then it's up to you to continue. I mean, that's what the playoffs are all about when it's down to one opponent, a singular opponent. And so, they're not at the playoffs yet, but they're sort of headed in that direction. And so not too soon, in my opinion, to start with the adjustments. And let's see what do these wrinkles look like tonight? The idea of Elias Pettersson in the bumper, something we really haven't seen an awful lot of, but I'm all for it because what's been going on hasn't been working for the Vancouver Canucks for far too long now.
J-Pat, we're approaching the 1 month mark for Nikita Zadorov's arrival. Of course, the game against Philly was tough for him, probably his worst game as a Canuck. But overall, what have you made of his impact and his addition to the blue line?
Yeah, 600th game the other night, and I have to imagine that there have been 590 some that have been better than that one. That was tough. I mean, the giveaway on the goal was bad, but there was a giveaway early in the hockey game that led to a great chance for Travis Konechny as well. I think for the most part, though, he's been kind of as advertised. He's come in, he's provided a physical element. I think that he stuck up for teammates. We saw that in Chicago when the Blackhawks went after Elias Pettersson, or at least laid the body on Elias Pettersson. I think that's part of his role. I guess I was all in on the idea that a Zadorov-Myers pairing was going to be just wild to watch, that it was going to be these two massive bodies and, it was going to be high event and all that kind of stuff. But it really, for the most part, it hasn't been. And the underlying numbers would suggest that those two have kind of held their own and not given up an awful lot. And that's what you want. I guess as Carson Soucy nears his return, is it as simple as Soucy replaces Noah Juleson and it's going to be a Carson Soucy, Ian Cole pairing? And if so, does that make Myers and Zadorov your second pair? Do they drop down? Are they your third pair? I thought it was curious today to hear Rick Tocchet say that with all these bodies and the fact that Soucy is really close now, he's not going to play tonight. But Tocchet said it may be as simple as, decisions will be based on a game-by-game sort of proposition here. So he said, it might come down to who plays well tonight and who doesn't will be the guy that comes out of the lineup. Now, again, will he hold true to that? If Noah Juleson plays well and Tyler Myers had a tough night, does Tyler Myers come right out of the Vancouver Canucks lineup when Carson Soucy is back? So, that's a roundabout answer to your question. But I think for the most part, Zadorov has been good. Has he been good to the level of, a long-term extension at the kind of dollars that have been tossed around? I'm still in a wait-and-see mode there. I do think that you make the trade that, they're going to try everything to get him under contract. But I'm not sure that I want to commit the dollars that have been floated out there at this stage. But there is still half a season or more to go. So, we'll see where those negotiations ultimately lead.
Jeff, who's on rink wide with you tonight?
Irfan Ghaffar will be sitting in to launch the first rink wide of the new year. And, yeah, I mean, final game here for the Canucks, so the homestand, and then out on the road. So we'll see what they can do. This feels like one that's there for the taking against the Senators team that can score some goals, but can give up some goals. Gave up 46 shots the other night against Buffalo, but Anton Forsberg made 45 saves, and he's going to get the start again. It was interesting, just looking back at my notes, the Canucks beat the Senators 5-3 in Ottawa on November the 9th, the start of that quick 3-game Eastern road trip with Casey DeSmith in goal. Remember, the Canucks scored 15 seconds in. Brock Besser, the first shot of the game, they had to review it because Forsberg stopped it, but the puck went over the line. Canucks scored twice in the first 3 minutes. They only had 3 shots on goal, though, in that first period, and only 16 on the night. So, they did what they had to do, and they scored, and Elias Pettersson had 3 points that night, and their big guns came out. But Ottawa can be a tricky opponent, and I don't think the Canucks are in any position to take anybody lightly. But they've been off so long here. It's a question of, can they find their legs? And they didn't have them against Philadelphia. So, if you're heading out on a 7-game road trip, you certainly want to use it as a springboard here, your final home game. They've been good at home for the most part. I expect that the Vancouver Canucks will bounce back and be a whole lot better than they were against the Philadelphia Flyers when they see the Senators tonight. But yeah, Irf and I will be on afterwards to break it all down.
Fantastic. I'll be with you on Saturday. It's going to be a good time. Going to be a good time, as it always is, over on Rinkwide. So if you haven't already, folks, be sure to go subscribe to Rinkwide Vancouver, wherever you get your podcast. Jeff, thanks so much for doing this, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Jeff Paterson. Like I said, Rinkwide Vancouver. Make sure you listen to it post-game. Really, really solid analysis, especially when I'm on that show. One thing that I wanted to highlight that Jeff brought up, and we're running so behind, so we have a lot to fit in, but Elias Pettersson getting some reps in at the net front. I'm really curious what
Bumper.
Thank you. In the bumper position, I'm really curious what that's going to mean, because the chat's talking about it too, about how, look, that was Bo Horvat's spot. All the Horvat goals turned into Brock Besser goals this year. And now the power play has had a few games where they haven't been clicking maybe as well as many would have hoped, including those guys. So I just find it interesting, because the messaging from the team in terms of when you talk to players, when you talk to coaches about it, was like, we'll figure it out. Like, we have a good power play, and it's a fair stance to have. I'm just interested now to see if this is an actual change that we start to see more, like if it's more noticeable now that he's in the bumper spot, like if that actually changes the complexion of the power play in any way, or if they're just going to keep rotating and he'll end up somewhere else.
Well, with the handedness you do get, because Pettersson's a left shot, whereas Besser and Kuzmenko weren't, is now all of a sudden it's easier for Miller on the left half wall he has a one-timer option, right? And so much of what made Bo successful in the bumper was JT's an elite playmaker from that left half wall. And whether it was Miller to Bo directly, or whether they'd go Miller down low to the net front, back up to Bo as like a tic-tac-toe play, there were so many one-timers coming from that bumper spot. And it's why Horvat was by far the team's power play goals leader since, I want to say, the 2021 season. He'd been absolutely feasting from there. So you'll also notice that a lot of times to get that one-timer bumper look again, you'd see Miller shifting to the right side, and he'd be trying to make that saucer pass to Besser, and it would work. But you can tell that's the play Miller really likes, is having a one-timer in the bumper. But to do that when it's Besser there or another right shot, he's having to skate to the other side, and then all of a sudden it's just not his natural spot where he's at his best. So I'm curious to see how that wrinkle affects the look of the power play. But in general, you were asking J-Pat earlier about, has it become too predictable? I don't think it's necessarily too predictable. I just think their execution is off in terms of how they're snapping the puck around, their passing especially. Early in the season, it felt like the pace and the precision with which they were able to move the puck around the zone was just something that you couldn't keep up with as a PK. Whereas now, too many situations of guys bobbling the puck, passes going off skates. Even when they do get, let's say, a shooting look, so many times they're not able to get the puck through traffic, or they're missing the net. They're off the mark. I don't think that it's that penalty kills have adjusted to such a point that they're completely stymieing the Canucks. I think it's on the players themselves, how they're executing. And you can also tell that's the case when they're having to go back to regroup and then on their entries to get set up. I just don't have that same level of confidence that it did early in the season that they're going to be able to make those high traffic, nifty little passing plays where there's pressure on you, but when you can command puck control, you're just able to weave in and get set up anyway.
Able to get through the neutral zone with ease. They haven't been able to do that as much lately. And especially once they're through the neutral zone, then they can't get set up. So hopefully things start to turn around for the Canucks power play here. Some listener feedback, and we'll get to anyone else in a second here. But Mr. Joker said, I don't mind having EP40 in the Bo Horvat position. Sniper said, I think PD is too small for that spot, but I'm happy to see how it goes. So we'll see how that goes. And we will get to more listener feedback on anyone else section. But before we do that, we need to do our Light the Lamp contest brought to you by our friends over at 4 Winds Brewing. Okay, I had to get it right. There it is. Vancouver is playing Ottawa tonight, and we want to know who's going to score the first goal for Vancouver. If you nail it, you could win a $25 gift card to the 4 Winds Tap Room located at 72nd and River Road in Delta. Enter by following us on social media and keep an eye out for today's show clip and comment who you think will light the lamp and score the first goal tonight. Winners will be contacted directly. Check us out at Canucks Army or at Canucks Convo on Twitter, at CanucksArmy.com on Instagram, and Canucks Army on Facebook. And make sure you ask about 4 Winds Light Lager at your local liquor store or have some delivered to your front door through the online shop at 4windsbrewing.ca as you see it right in front of us. I'm going with Bumper Petey scores the first goal tonight. Bumpin' Petey.
Damn, I was going to go with Paterson, not because of the bumper, but because against Philly, I thought that line was quietly good and that his skating looked faster than it has at points early in the season where maybe he wasn't as impactful at 5-on-5.
Yeah. Okay. Grady, did you have a pick you wanted? Yeah.
I wanted to quickly mention the comment about PD apparently being too small for the bumper. Totally disagree, because look at somebody like Braden Point, who for so long has been able to feast in the middle there. I don't think size really, it's not like you're battling for position in the bumper slot.
Contrary to what I said, it's not net front. He's in the bumper spot.
Yeah, it's like the skills you need to be successful in the bumper are an ability to, like, you need to be a smart player to understand the angles so that you're actually available in passing lanes. Like, you have to read and react based off how the PK, what shooting lanes they're taking away, what passing lanes they're taking away. Like Besser early in the season, for example, he would get some looks because he's a smart offensive player as well. The PK would be collapsing towards the middle, lower in the slot, and then he'd sort of shade back up towards the high slot, and then he'd get open that way. So you need a smart brain that way. You need a quick release on your shot, and you want somebody that has good hands, which, I mean, Bo checked a lot of those boxes as well. PD does too. So not guaranteeing that he's going to be successful there, but I like it as a look.
Tyson Cole, a new writer at Canucks Army, made his debut for us today. He was one of the recipients of this year's Bochford Project, and he just wrote his first article for Canucks Army, and it's about Rick Tocchet's comments on Brock Besser's positioning, and he highlights this. He highlights the work in the bumper spot and shooting from the high slot and what you need to get there. Tyson looked a lot at NHL Edge data, so you can go look at that at CanucksArmy.com. But the one thing that I wanted to highlight was this quote from Tocchet, similar to what you just said. He said he gets to that area quickly. When the pressure hits in defensive zone coverage, he can find that non-pressure area. It's only open for about a second or two, and if you get there slower, it will close up. And Elise Pettersson is not a slow player, and he definitely doesn't think the game slowly either. So a really good point by you. And like I said, I am interested to see what it's going to look like tonight and really how much it changes the complexion of the power play. Because you just mentioned it about Miller coming down on the half wall. He's dominant there, and having the option for the one-timer with Pettersson, I'm really curious what that ends up looking like. And that's who I'm going with for my light lamp. Okay, anything else on tonight before we get to anyone else? Nope. Okay. Thatcher Demko starts. Wayne Gretzky in the house. Yeah. Okay. Let's do it. Let's get into our anyone else segment presented by our friends at DoorDash. It's our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat, and it's also our listeners' chance to get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. That's right, for a limited time, you can get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on your first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app and enter code NATION25. That's all capital letters, NATION, and the numbers 25 for 25% off, up to $10 value, and 0 delivery fees on your first order with code NATION25. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms do apply. Okay, we've got a lot in here, and I appreciate it. Everybody's here for 2024, the new year. We've got a lot of people in the chat. I wanted to start with this one. This one from Oz Nuck. Have the Canucks' priorities shifted to acquiring immediate help, i.e. player trades, as opposed to future assets and draft picks? And this is something that I wanted to talk about because I find the whole conversation around this very interesting. Because you have guys like me who on our last shows saying, trade Elias Lindholm, whatever it takes, go get him. Go load up for this season. Go make a push in this year's playoffs, right? You spoke about the divisional matchup in the playoffs and how it might not be the best idea, but I'm still a vibes guy. I still like it. Go get Elias Lindholm. But to management's credit, we've seen this team get off to such a hot start, right? And, a lot of what we were being told, and when you and I looked under the hood, we realized, yes, okay, this isn't sustainable and it's happening off of this, but they're probably still a good team, not a great team just yet. They're probably not in that elite level of teams, but they're right there. They're close, right? To management's credit, they haven't looked at these results, at least publicly and with their moves. They haven't looked at these results and said, yeah, we're legit. Like, yeah, our president thought that everything needed to go right for us to be a playoff team, but he was wrong. Apparently he was wrong, because look at us now. We're going to go out and we're going to do all these crazy win now moves. Like, if your big move in a player trade is moving a third and a fifth to go get Nikita Zadorov, which makes your team better, and I think they were right in that estimation that it made their team better. If that's your move, I don't think you have a flawed process. Like, I don't think you're necessarily shifting your focus to player trades and putting away from draft picks. Like, I think good teams, especially in the stage where the Canucks are right now, don't have just one focus. I think when you're a cup contender, you have one focus. Or if you're a rebuilding team, you have one focus. I think if you can walk and chew gum, which the last management regime couldn't do, and we're not sure if they could literally do that either. We've never been told, but they couldn't do that in the last management regime. They were trying to do both, but they were doing both pretty half-assed when you looked at it, right? So I think that's one thing this management group needs credit for, is that they've kept their eye on the future. They've established their process in Abbotsford, and they've got the right people in terms of the coaching staff and the development staff in their mind that is going to make them be able to have these guys continue to come down the pipeline, right? And we've spoken about Lekarmaki already. You got Willander, you've got all these other guys, and obviously there's still development work going down in Abbotsford. I just find it interesting that they haven't bought in necessarily to what they've been seeing. They haven't overcommitted based on what they've seen to start this year.
Yes, but even if they were in a position where they were completely buying in and they're like, this is the year, we're going to mortgage our future, which I don't think they would have.
So if I was GM,
yeah. So if you were GM, you still wouldn't actually be able to execute on that until close to the deadline.
Yeah.
Because what big trades have happened mid-season so far?
Anthony Beauvillier. Yeah, no,
but
you're right.
So that it's a little too early to say that, but to the original question as a whole, I think in general, yeah, you are at a point now where you're like, to me, I don't really care about adding draft picks anymore. That doesn't mean that I'm now taking whatever picks I have and throwing them out the window like they're useless to me, but that's not like adding more of them isn't really a priority from my perspective. If I'm in the Canucks shoes, yeah, you're in a position where if you're Vancouver, the challenge essentially is how do we solve our long-term needs, continue to get to the point where we can be a legit cup contender over the interim future without giving up too many pieces to where our window is going to be too short.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. And so it is a delicate line that they're going to have to straddle, and it's not going to be easy. But yeah, you are in that mode where you're looking to add to this team, and adding futures doesn't really it's not a priority.
Okay, this one from Jesse C. Does Lekkerimäki get instant power play 1 spot in Abbotsford next year, or do they make him earn it? This transitions well into my anyone else for the day, which was about Patrick Alvin's quotes on the Swedish broadcast of Sweden's last game of the preliminary round. He spoke, and this was translated by a Reddit user. I'm sorry, I gave you credit in the Canucks Army article. Just can't remember the name off the top of my head. It was translated by a Reddit user, and basically what he said was that Jonathan Lekkerimäki, they're hoping is going to be in Abbotsford next year, and talked about the improvements that he's made. Spoke about Willander and Paterson as well. A bit more of a timid approach with those guys, like talking about how it's going to take a little bit longer, that type of thing. But with Lekkerimäki, he said he hopes to see him in training camp next year and in Abbotsford next year. So we'll see what happens there. But he was also on the TSN broadcast today of Sweden's game against Switzerland, and he said it in English, so I really understood it this time. He said that he hopes that Lekkerimäki is going to be in training camp and that they're excited to get a look at him. It's interesting because I think in the past, you've not always been sure that, okay, this SHL prospect is going to want to play in Abbotsford, right? Like, or in the AHL, I should say, right? They would play in the SHL, and then when it's time for them to come to the NHL, they would do that. But if it wasn't going to be in the NHL, then they would just go back to SHL where they're more comfortable, right? So I found it interesting that he's talking about Abbotsford, and I'm curious what that's going to look like for Jonathan Lekkerimäki, because back to Jesse's question about instant power play 1 spot, Danila Klimovich isn't an instant power play guy in Abbotsford, right? Like, they're really working on making Danila Klimovich a well-rounded player, and you have to think they'll be doing the exact same thing with Jonathan Lekkerimäki, right? Like, that's the thing that I always come back to, is when you talk about organizational alignment, Jeremy Colleton in Abbotsford is doing a great job. He's preparing guys to play for the Rick Tocchet Vancouver Canucks. Like, that's what Jeremy Colleton's job is with these young guys. So you're going to need to be well-rounded at 5-on-5. You can't just be a power play merchant. And part of earning your power play time is being able to, have that commitment, that work ethic, all those cliches that we're going to hear from the coaching staff. I don't think he's just handed a power play 1 spot, even though I was telling you before the show today, I think he'd be good on the Vancouver Canucks power play right now. Like, he'd be good on power play 1. I think he'd be fine there. But then, of course, you have to play him at 5-on-5 as well, which maybe he's not quite ready for just yet at the NHL level. But when you see what he's doing on the power play for Sweden, you obviously start to ask those questions. I still don't think he's given that spot right away.
On talent, he should be, but
I just point to what happened with Klimovich.
The thing is, though, he's already such a weapon on an SHL power play, and the SHL is still a really, really good league. So to me, when you look at the shot that he has, maybe you also kind of have to look at what other power play pieces you have in Abbotsford, what everybody's role is, and is there an obvious need for somebody on the left flank, which is where Lekkerimäki is best. I think that would go into it. Not just, hey, he's talented, but the fit of it. But the even strength aspect is obviously going to be the main thing that he's going to have to adjust to, because the AHL is a really physical league. It is, especially for younger prospects, that Lekkerimäki's not making a jump from junior, but a lot of these, like Cole Lind is a great example, where I think for him it was a bit of a shell shock, and he was like dominant in the WHL, comes over to the A, and it's a massive learning curve. And he's a guy that wasn't small or undersized, whereas Lekkerimäki, he's still going to have to put on a lot of size. And the SHL is a very different style of play, because with the larger ice surface, there isn't a lot of chip and chase. There isn't a lot of forechecking. It's very possession-based hockey, whereas in the AHL, especially if you're trying to develop prospects to eventually play under Rick Tocchet, where in Vancouver now, it is a lot of a forecheck-based offense. It's a very different style of play. It's a more physical league, and they're going to be a lot more defensive, demands. So I think even strength, there will be quite a bit of a learning curve. And that's why with Lekarimaki, he's got a really interesting ceiling. You're going to have to be patient, I think, and not expect that, oh, he gets to Abbotsford, he's going to immediately be lighting it up. If that's what he does, amazing, fantastic, then he's probably ahead of schedule in terms of when you anticipate him making the NHL. But if it takes him time to get going, that's okay too, because there's a lot that is going to be on his plate.
Karan said, I think he starts on PP2 and very quickly goes to PP1. Once they see his shot on North American ice, they'll be forced to put him there. And I think that is also a pretty safe take. Okay, we still want to size up the month of January. Maybe we'll push that tomorrow, but I already titled the episode. I don't know. Grady, change the title of the podcast. Focus on the YouTube live show. I'm sorry, this will be tomorrow's episode. We'll change it up a little bit, but actually no, we have time. We can fit it in. We'll fit it in. Unless, what do you want to do? You want to continue the conversation tomorrow?
I got it up already.
Yeah, we got it up. Let's look quickly, sizing up the Canucks month of January. I'm sure these conversations will continue after we break down tonight's game against the Senators tomorrow. Okay, you and I were talking about this on the last episode. We're talking about it again, and we're going to talk about it tomorrow as well. The Canucks month of January, not quite as daunting as maybe we originally thought, maybe as I originally thought, because I was talking, look, and that's the thing, I'm interested, I want to ask players about this, about what's harder, playing harder opponents or playing like way more hockey. Like if you could choose between playing 2 games in 5 or 6 nights against hard opponents or 4 games in 6 nights against middle tier opponents who the Canucks are going to face a lot of on the road.
The latter would probably be more difficult, I'd say, especially just because of the travel component. But in this case, I was doing the math for January, and I believe that only 3 of the 13 opponents Canucks face in the month of January are currently in a playoff spot. So yeah, that trip, especially as it starts going out east, is going to be difficult. But when you look at who they're playing, it's a lot of teams that either defend poorly and or have bad goaltending. So like Ottawa, they struggle defensively. They have bad goaltending. The Blues, they don't defend particularly well. The Devils, they're a really good team, but they don't have stable goaltending. Rangers and Islanders are different. They are both pretty good in those areas. Although even the Islanders are missing, they're missing Pelech, Pulock, Mayfield. Last I checked like a week ago. Now, some of those guys may return by that time, but their blue line looks like Mayfield, for example, has been back, but they've got a banged up blue line, so they're not quite the same. Then you get to Pittsburgh. They've tightened things up recently, and they have good goaltending, but with a blue line that includes Carlson, Letang, and Ryan Graves not fitting in, they can be loosey-goosey defensively, and I think when the data came out like a month ago, they were among the league's worst teams in surrendering odd man rushes. Buffalo's a mess defensively and goaltending. Same thing with Columbus. You go down then when the Canucks return home and you're playing teams like Arizona, Toronto. Toronto has goaltending woes and doesn't defend particularly well. Chicago, St. Louis, Columbus. Like this is the type of month where, especially because the Canucks are going to enter the road trip after the Ottawa game, having only played 1 game in 9 days, so they should be relatively rested. I don't think January is too challenging, especially because I don't think they're going to have to work too hard for their offense. Whereas if you look at February, I think that's a lot more challenging because in February you play, for example, Boston twice, and they're really stingy. Winnipeg's been really stingy this year. Hellebuck's been on fire. You have to play them. You're going to play Colorado. You're going to play LA for the first time. You're going to play Carolina, where their goaltending has been a problem, but they typically defend really well. So, I mean, even Seattle, like they're not as easy to play based on their recent form as they were probably early in the year. The Kraken are above 500 now. They're like 7-0-2, and they've given up like 5 goals in their last 5 games. So, I think the month of February is actually harder schedule-wise than January is.
Interesting. I looked at March and April too in my article recently for Canucks Army, and like March and April is when the Canucks have all of their matchups against Vegas and LA. So other than those teams, those months are a little bit easier and there's less travel involved, and that it becomes easier from that aspect. But yeah, the opponents are not easy heading into March and April, but February as well. So it'll be interesting. January is looking less daunting than maybe you originally thought. But yeah, the travel, man, like let's not discount the travel. East Coast travel is not easy on these players. So we'll see. We'll see
and
how it goes.
A couple of weird start times.
Exactly.
Like Buffalo on the 13th is 1 p.m. Pacific, and Monday against Columbus is a 10 a.m. Start.
On a Monday.
On a Monday. That's so weird.
That's going to be the first time in our show's history where like rink wide will have wrapped up right before we go live. That'll be really interesting. A 10 a.m. start on January 15th against the Columbus Blue Jays. That's going to be the is that their other Frozen Frenzy day? Is every team playing on that day?
I don't know.
That'd be the most NHL thing ever to put it on like a Monday at 10 a.m. Anyways, we'll see. We'll see how the month ends up going. But I just wanted to quickly preview and size up the month of January in this one. We've got some more anyone else's that I wanted to get to before we wrap up here. This one, what were your jersey numbers while growing up and playing sports? What was the reasoning behind the number? Anytime I was goalie in hockey, Roberto Luongo, number 1. I had number 1 on the back of my jersey. Anytime I could. In baseball, I was 24 because of Robinson Cano. And then I moved to number 1 because in baseball, the smaller guys usually wear number 1. So when everybody grew and I didn't, I went with number 1. And then I played men's league and I went with double zeros because I think it looks sick, and I think that's my number now.
I don't like double zeros.
I'm gonna play men's league again, baseball. And I think I'm gonna go double zeros again.
No.
I like that number. It looks sharp on a baseball jersey. It looks sharp. I like it. Double zeros.
No, I hate it.
I like it. What were your numbers? You played soccer?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Well, a lot of times you can really like pick any number type thing. It'd be like they had a certain amount of jerseys, and it's like you could pick between like a few numbers.
Okay.
When I could pick, I picked 17 because of Ryan Kessler. Other than that, I'd often go number 2 because I'd play like central defensive midfield. So I wanted a low number, just like in hockey, like defensemen wear lower numbers, and 2 was also my birth date, so I'd go with that. So those would be my 2 most often picks.
I like it. Breakaway book, excuse me, said 69 all day, every day. I requested that once when I played. There was like the all-star team for summer.
You're better than that
in baseball, and they're like, you can pick whatever number you want. I was like, all right, and I did 69. I was like 13. I did not get 69. Okay, we had another one here. Okay, yes, the Winter Classic. We haven't even touched on it. RP88. What did you guys think of the Seattle Kraken fish throwing walk-in at the outdoor game? I thought those fish got very close to the players' heads, and I'm just imagining that right before walking out, whoever the PR, whoever was like, "Do not flinch. These people will not hit you with the fish." And I just want to say, like, the fish looked like they were getting very, very close, like dangerously close. I don't know. Was it real fish in the fish tunnel?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, might have smelled. It was something I was trying to figure out. Was the Kraken walked in as Pike Place fishermen people, and Vegas walks in as Elvis, all dressed like Elvis. I thought Elvis, that was sick. Some people really didn't like that. I thought that was cool.
Well, I will say the people in Seattle are probably happy that they could put on a show that Frank Saravalli can spoil beforehand. You remember this expansion draft? They're putting on this huge show of revealing these picks. Meanwhile, like hours beforehand, the entire expansion draft has basically been leaked by Frank, which is awesome reporting.
I hope we have him on tomorrow. I hope Frank can join us tomorrow, because that will 100% be my first question. Is Frank, how disappointed were you that the Kraken did an event that you weren't able to spoil? And did you tell your kids everything they were getting for Christmas on the 22nd? Oh man, great times, good times. Yeah, hopefully we have Frank Saravalli on. But what do you think of the Winter Classic?
I didn't get a chance to catch it live, actually.
Okay. I didn't think Seattle was that good, but I haven't watched many Kraken games this year. But you look at their place in the standings, you look at how they played when they matched up against the Canucks, and look, Seattle's starting to find it looks like, and they're right back in the playoff spot. And that was something you and I were just talking about right before we went to air. So we'll see what happens. I just want to say Joey Decord got the shutout because he had that beautiful mask with all that Mariners all those Mariners cards on. I think he had a Cal card. He had obviously he had Griffey on there as well. And Cal Raleigh. I remember I was throwing this out there. I was like, I wonder which Mariners players are going to be there because a lot of Mariners players go home. But I was putting it all together. A lot of the Mariners players were really disappointed with how last season ended. So like Ty France bought property in Seattle and he's staying all off season. They have this place called Driveline that they go to. And I heard, it's just Twitter, I heard it, that a bunch of players were going to be staying in Seattle this offseason. And there's your confirmation. They're here all 6 weeks until pitchers and catchers report for baseball.
I don't know how you snuck baseball talk in again, but one thing I want to say with Seattle is they're actually a perfect example of why the NHL point system should change, because you can look at them and technically they're above 500. They're 1 point back of a playoff spot, although they've played extra games relative to basically everybody. But really, you look at it and they've got 9 OT and shootout losses. So really, they've really only won 15 of 38 games. They've won 15 games, lost 23, and they're still somehow in the playoff race. Come on. Yep. That's bogus, in my opinion.
And hey, someone asked us earlier, what rules? I don't have your name. I think it might have been Mr. Joker. Someone asked, what rules would you apply? The PWHL, which debuted this past weekend, it was a great start for that league, by the way. I really like their rule about if you score a shorthanded goal, your player comes out of the box. First of all, the NHL should absolutely have that. The second thing that they should have is another thing that this league is doing with the 3-2-1 point system.
Yeah.
The Canucks would be in first place by a country mile if the NHL had that, but they won't have it. And I had someone explain this to me. They won't have it because it would mean a lot of teams out of the playoff race very early in the season. And the NHL kind of needs that competitiveness all season long where you have buildings full of people, or as full as it can get, where teams are still competing and they're not out of it by like January, February. But I don't know. I like what the PWHL is doing with those two rules in particular.
But you know what it does? It just creates fake playoff races. Like they're not really real. It's superficial.
You're right.
Where Boudreaux Canucks are a perfect example. It looked like the Canucks were back in the playoff race after the hot start, but because you'd open up NHL.com and they're 6 points out or they're 5 points out. But in reality, making up that ground is nearly impossible when the teams ahead of you are collecting loser points. Whereas, sure, at a superficial level, there might be a bigger difference in points and in playoff races. But if a team actually gets hot in the second half, they can actually make up that ground in a 3-2-1 system.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, you just kind of proved my point about why the NHL really likes their system. Look, we were talking about it. We were like, oh yeah, the Canucks are right there knocking on the door of the playoff. Like that's what the NHL wants. They want those storylines. So, I know you were bringing it up as a counter argument to the 3-2-1 system, but someone from NHL PR is watching this and being like, bang on, Harmon. Great work. That's exactly why we do it. Yeah, races. Exactly. That's exactly why they do it, which is very interesting. Thank you so much to everybody. We had a lot of listeners today in our first show of 2024 who tuned into the show tomorrow. We'll have a bigger anyone else section tomorrow. I promise. We were just a little behind after talking for 5 minutes, but we got to get to our Betway bet of the day as we get set to close out our show here. Bring it up. Great little tongue twister there. Our Betway bet of the day, back to Jonathan Lekaramaki, baby. Sweden to be the outright winner of the World Juniors. A $10 bet at plus 200 odds returns you $30 over on Betway. It must be 90 plus to play. Choose your limit. Or wait, no, excuse me. It must be 90 plus to play. Know your limit. Play within it. Okay. Let's close it there. We'll close it there. I have more on Lekaramaki, but I'm sure it'll still be there tomorrow. Hopefully Saravalli can join us tomorrow. I'd love to talk to him about the Kraken and how that all came together and how he didn't get to spoil anything about the Winter Classic. Close it there. Any final thoughts before I do this?
Nope.
All right. Make sure you watch Rink Wide tonight, folks. Listen to Rink Wide wherever you get your podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. But for now, signing off. My name is Dave Gugelli. That is Harmon Dial. Our technical producer is Grady Sass. Our thanks to Jeff Paterson for joining us on today's episode of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation with Harmon and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite podcast catcher app.